Let's talk about something that's on everybody's mind. It's a COVID. It seems like it doesn't go away. But I've seen folks that have you get a little bit of help, little bit of folks in the cities want to help you, give you a little advice.
Right.
But it seems to me in this state, let me just ask you, can you get a vaccine if you want one right now?
There's no question. People walk past the vaccine every day. Yeah. If you want a vaccine, you can get it. I think what's always been the issue is balancing out freedom and letting people make their own choices. And I think that's fundamentally something I did from day one, to let people make the decisions what's best for them. I talked to some people today earlier and I said, look, here's what you ought to do. Just kind of get all the clutter out of all the things that are being said. And who do you really go to when you feel like an illness in your family? Who's the first person you go to? You go to a doctor. And I encourage people, just go to your doctor and ask them, and then you make a judgment what's best for you and your family.
Interesting to me, I viewed it as your job to make sure those vaccines are out there.
Right.
And they are.
Most certainly.
You've been vaccinated, so was the First Lady. You've told folks, you've encouraged folks. I don't know what more you can do.
Well, you know what the reality of it is, at some point, personal responsibility has to come in. And you can't just depend on government to tell you everything to do all the time. That's probably the worst road we can go down. At some point, everyone in this state right now, for the most part, knows what the situation is. They know where the vaccine's at. They know the risk, the known risk of what to do. It's the point right now they've got to decide whether they want a vaccine or not. And I think in fairness to the general public, it's like everybody thinks we ought to all be vaccinated already. The vaccine hasn't been available to the general public for less than 6 months. And it seems like it's been a long time. But just try vaccinating 6 million people. It's going to take a while to get through that process. And I think everybody wants it to be like a light switch, but it's never going to be that way because not everybody's going to get vaccinated.
So help me out. My dad, back in West Butler County, got his vaccine pretty quick. Right. My mama will not hear of it. Help me out. How do you convince Terry Vaughn in West Butler County to get her vaccine?
Yeah, I think what's going to convince her, if she is to be convinced, it'll be people she knows, people that's had to deal with the virus, that's had to deal with it, and some effect it's had personally in their lives. I think you're starting to see that now across the state. We're all starting to know somebody that's had it, and we're also now seeing this delta in all our small communities and realize, hey, this is the real deal. And but I think that's how somebody like her, if she's been hesitant to do that, I think it'll be a matter of just the reality of saying, when I lose a friend, when something happens to somebody I know, to realize, I wonder if that vaccine would have prevented that.
All right, so there's a bunch of kids started school this week.
Yeah.
A bunch more in St. Louis will start school tomorrow. If you're a kid and you've got a school board who's decided you have to wear a mask, I have been a supporter of yours on local control. I think it's been great.
Right.
At what point do you, when you try to get a 5-year-old kid and think they're going to wear a mask all day, when does local control and common sense just start butting heads?
Well, I think that's a perfect example you're going to see on that. You know, I've always been a local control guy all along, and I've never changed on that. But I think the reality is you got to realize what is the real effect of these children, whether they wear a mask or whether they don't wear a mask. And I think you got to see what the science is behind that and how that adjusts. So I think trying to make a 5-year-old kid wear a mask all day, I think practically it's going to be very difficult to do.
Yeah.
I do. And again,
are you considering at all stepping in and helping those school kids out and saying, we've let the school boards, but there is a point where, it's one of those things where if you live in St. Louis, the government's going to tell you a lot of what to do.
Yeah.
If you live in Bolivar, they're not.
Right.
But like in Wheatland, there's no mask ordinance. Yeah. There's no mask orders. Right. But would you step in? A kid can't leave St. Louis. Yeah. He gets where his parents are. Would you going to step in and help him?
Yeah, the perfect example you just brought up, Scott, is how much different it is in my hometown of Bolivar versus St. Louis. Yeah. You've seen what happened in St. Louis County, and I think you're headed down this same road. For number one, I think the legislators need to be involved in that decision process. When St. Louis County overstepped their boundaries, which I believe they did, what happened? Legislative action was taken. People understood that, says, no, that's not right, we're going to do that. Now, as governor, you have a lot of powers. But again, I think it's really important that you get the voice of everybody in the state that has a stake in this. And each legislator, no matter where they're from, has a say in this to represent that. So I think it's important to have that input. And when they did make a change, we signed that change in because of exactly what happened.
Your law seemed to work. In St. Louis City, they had a mask mandate. Apparently the public supported it. Their legislative body hasn't overturned it. In the county, I don't think it had the public support. Obviously, the legislative body didn't support it.
Right.
But there's no check on the school board.
Yeah. Right.
Well, would you consider at any point coming in and saying, look, you're not going to mask a poor little kid just because he happens to live in St. Louis?
Yeah, you know what? Hypothetically, you can look at all those situations, just like that situation. When that balance tips, then yes, you're going to step in and you're going to probably do something at that point. I think we all look at that, But again, I'm a firm believer in local control. I want the local people to take care of that as much as possible. And I want to make sure they defend it one way or the other, or they oppose it. When you've seen what happened in St. Louis County, exactly what happened. People flooded that council meeting, and the executive director up and says, hey, this is not what we want. We're not going to do it. And they stopped it. And you'd like to see that type of action go. But I think if you just say you did all of that and it's still not working, still people are abusing their powers, then yes, I think sometimes at some point you got to step in.
It's interesting to me, you know, you've been at every level of this. If I had to guess, the real end result of trying to make a 7-year-old kid wear a mask all day is going to be some things that fundamentally change Missouri public schools. It's going to hit your desk. And if I had to guess, you may see something that checks the ability to force masks, but you're going to see a lot of other changes that have nothing related to that. I think there's a shift. It's been rural folks that have kind of made public schools be left alone. I think they're eroding that trust.
Well, I don't think there's any question what we've seen over the last year, some of the changes that you've seen, some of the votes and some of the bills that come out of the legislature this year might not have happened if it hadn't been strictly for some of the mandates that were across the state and how some of the schools were. But I also think it's important, Scott, to remember that 95% of the schools did the right thing. You know, the vast majority of the people in the state, the schools did the right thing. They went back to school. They had kids in the classroom. And look, the bottom line is you got to have a kid in a classroom. And, you know, that should be the #1 goal. You know, the mask debate is a mask debate to have it. But the point of it is kids need to be in a classroom setting. They need to be getting an education. And they also need to be there for a safety net. Good, bad, or indifferent, those schools are a lot of places those kids have all the place they got that they're somewhat secure in their lifetime for just a little bit.